All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started, guys, but it's so good to see folks from Boise here this morning. And if anybody else pops in, we'll just be really excited to have them here. So anyway, before we get started, my name is Sheila Weaver. I'm the lead navigator and the project coordinator for the Family Caregiver Navigator project. I've been in this role, gosh, just about 6 weeks now. I came from the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare, where I worked in child protection for the last 7 years. Yeah, somebody else popping in. Yes, I worked in child protection for the last 7 years at the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare. And I'm just really honored to be in this role. Over the last 6 weeks, I've gotten the chance to interact with a lot of caregivers, and I constantly find myself just really inspired by being in the presence of people who care so deeply about their community and their families and the people in their lives. And if I was a little smarter, I'd probably start my day every day by calling and thanking a caregiver. So just thank you so much for your work and the impact that you have to make our community a little better place. And I really do appreciate that. And I will pass it off to my colleague, Emma.
Hi there, everybody. My name is Emma Valentine, and I have been with the project for a little over a year now. I started as an MSW intern, working to get my hours so that I could become an MSW, and I'm almost there. I'll graduate this summer. But the reason that I actually chose to do the Family Caregiver Navigator project is because I have a medically complex son who came home on a lot of medical devices with home nursing. And that was my beginning of my journey into becoming a family caregiver myself, and I anticipate that I will probably do the same thing for my parents. And so it opened up a really special window into understanding, and I really treasure the opportunity to work with caregivers and to bond with them on that empathetic level and to help us all build a better community of support and widen those networks and access to those networks that sustain what it is that we do every day.
Thank you, Emma. Yeah, and Emma's a joy to work with. If you ever get to connect with Emma, she's fantastic person to know and a wealth of resources. And just a little orientation, we're going to be using the chat feature a little bit. So I hope if you kind of see on your bar there's a little bubble to hopefully use that chat feature, because we really want to hear from folks, if nothing else. And so we're just going to talk today about the Family Caregiver Navigator program. Well, first I'm going to throw up a little poll. So where are you at in your caregiver journey today? Are you in that fantastic range where you're feeling great? You're feeling okay, no complaints, a little overwhelmed, but you're keeping those balls in the air or the pins in the air? A little stressed, but coping, or just extremely distressed? And I'm going to throw up the poll right now. And it's an anonymous poll, so you can really tell us where you're at.
Yep. Oh, it looks like we're getting some results in here.
Yeah, we're getting people in.
A lot of okay, no complaints, which I'm impressed with. I'm impressed. We do have somebody who's extremely distressed. All right. We might be giving you some resources by the end of this. So
we might. Okay. If you're distressed or okay, or no matter where you're at in the spectrum, you're in the right place. So we've got, let's see here. I'll share this really quick. We've got some folks that are in that blue zone of that okay, no complaint zone. And then we have another person that's just feeling extremely distressed. So no matter where you're at on your caregiving journey, you're in the right place today, and we are so glad you're here. So in your role as a caregiver, do any of these statements, or in your role in your life, do any of these statements sound familiar? I'm spending more and more time managing medications for my parent, spouse, child, friend. And I think we heard Dr. Trump talking about that in her role, where she just suddenly finds herself being an untrained, a medication manager that wasn't really trained to do that initially. I find myself getting angry, having to repeat myself when my care recipient with dementia forgets what I just said. Again, we just heard about that this morning. I wish I had someone to talk to you about how much time it is taking him or her to stay at home. I wish, read that again. I wish you had someone to talk to about how much time it is taking to help him or her stay at home. Or I wish my siblings would help me more in caring for my parent. I've cut back my hours at work to be able to take care of somebody. Or, and I think we hear this so much, I just need a little time to myself. If any of these statements sound familiar to you, then Family Caregiver Navigator really is for you. Family Caregiver Navigator is a free low barrier service. That is one of my very favorite things about Family Caregiver Navigator, is that it's free, which is wonderful. The price is right. And then also too, it's very low barrier. I've worked in the social work world for several years, and it seems like there's always a catch. There's always well, how do we qualify? How do we get into this? What's the real story? Well, down the road, are we going to have to do something? That doesn't exist here. It really is just very, low barrier. If you identify as a caregiver and you're over the age of 18, you meet criteria for this program. Another thing that's, I just think, really wonderful about Family Caregiver Navigator is that it serves caregivers across the lifespan. And so we really are looking at that lifespan approach, where if you're somebody in Emma's shoes, where you're caring for a young child that has exceptional needs, or you're caring for a loved one, like a spouse, that you suddenly find yourself in that role of being husband or wife or caregiver, then Family Caregiver Navigator is for you. And then those more traditional roles as well that we might think of when we think of caregivers. Everybody fits here. What we do is that options counseling and resource referral by phone. So you don't have to come into an office. You can just talk to people on the phone, and we work with you that way. Our intervention is evidence-based, and that's really important to us, that we do something, that we do things that we know actually work for people, because we know your time is so valuable. We want to make sure that we're getting you what you need without having to take you in a circle, hopefully. And Emma's putting the website up, caregivernavigator.org. And like I said before, any adult who supports somebody with a physical, intellectual, cognitive disability or mental health condition can participate. So you can come in a couple different ways. There's that professional or self-referral. So if you go in and talk to a doctor or a social worker or anybody, and they see a need, they can refer you to this program. Or it really is just as simple as going to the Caregiver Navigator website, filling out a little screener, and we'll reach out to you. And then we have that initiation, with the caregiver. And then that kind of becomes like a back and forth, where the navigator really assesses, refers, and follows up, and we kind of keep that communication loop going to ensure those needs are met. The navigator puts the focus on the caregiver, not the person receiving care. I hear quite frequently that people call in and they want a service for that person in their life. So they call in, they say, I need A, B, C for my person. And so what we're able to do, and I think is really unique about Family Caregiver Navigator, is that we're able to say, this is for you. We want to make sure that you get what you need so that you can really sustain your time as a caregiver, and so that you can be healthy, and so that you can get your own needs met. Because I think we all can think back to that, that analogy about the parent and the child and the airplane, and if you don't have that mask on yourself, how can we take care of anybody else in our life? And so again, because your role is so crucial, we want to make sure that you have that support that you need. So we have that navigator there ready to go, really, with that support, those resources and referrals to really help support your success as a caregiver. And what we do, here's a little more. This is always the main event, is if we can get the video to work or not. So we shall see. And let's see if the sound works. We have to reshare this. I just realized that I think I shared it without sound.
Kat will let us know if the sound is working.
Okay.
On her end, so.
Many people don't identify.
Are folks hearing it? Okay, awesome.
As a caregiver, since it's just one of the many hats we wear in a busy life. Yet it's estimated that over 53 million people in the United States care for another person of any age with physical, cognitive disabilities, chronic or mental health conditions. In Idaho, that translates to 1 in 4 people who are caregivers to at least one person in their life. That means that caregiving affects every family in Idaho in one way or another. In addition to their own employment, hobbies, and household duties, caregivers take on all kinds of tasks for their care recipients, including shopping and chores, healthcare and medical management, financial support and management, and of course, emotional support. In fact, informal caregivers provide over 200 million hours of unpaid labor to care recipients in Idaho annually, worth an estimated $2 billion. But the cost of caregiving is not just dollars and cents. Caregiving for a friend or family member can be a joy, but it's also a sacrifice, leading to lifestyle changes that may increase stress for the caregiver. Time, money, and energy are limited resources, and caregiving can take its toll, sometimes leading to burnout that negatively impacts the caregiver and the person they're caring for. Enter Family Caregiver Navigator, a free program developed by the Idaho Caregiver Alliance. Using an evidence-based approach, we partnered with software developer TCare to support caregivers in a whole new way. First, connect with a navigator who will walk you through an assessment that evaluates your stress factors and overall well-being and capacity as a caregiver. Next, your navigator shares a list of recommendations customized just for you, and together you build a care plan that addresses your personal goals and connects you with local resources that can assist. Whether it's respite care, support groups, workshops and trainings, or assistance with financial support policies, our focus is on you and your needs as a caregiver. Weekly text surveys will keep your navigator updated on your progress and assure you are connecting with needed services. You can reach back out and amend your care plan at any time. Get started today by visiting caregivernavigator.org and taking the brief online screener to see your initial results. A navigator will then reach out to complete the full assessment. Providers and professionals have the option to submit a referral through our website, so we can reach out to a caregiver who may need support. The health and well-being of Idaho's caregivers matters. Call 208-426-5899 or visit caregivernavigator.org today for a free assessment and custom care plan, so you can build a sustainable plan for the years to come.
So again, we're just really proud to have this very low barrier, easy to enter program that can be really flexible with people, because we know your needs as a caregiver change as time goes on. So if we find out something's not working down the line, we can come back to it. So, and kind of reshift what we need to. Oh, I'm going to get stuck in this loop, guys. I'm just waiting for it. Okay, so here's our navigation team. We have a really, and I think something that I've really enjoyed my time here, just really getting to meet this really passionate, thoughtful group of people that care deeply for caregivers in our community. And they range the gamut from, you know, like Emma was talking about, MSW students. We have another social worker. We have me, who's a licensed clinical social worker. We have Stephanie Hoffman, who's a PhD level navigator and coordinator with the program. So we just really run the gamut. We have two Spanish speaking navigators. So we just have a nice array of people that are here and able to help, and we can really utilize each other for resources that the other might not know about. So just really a great team. And how we really see ourselves as seeing caregivers. And another thing that we encounter quite a bit in our line of work is that caregivers don't always identify as caregivers. And we think of somebody like Dale, who's caring for his wife with multiple sclerosis. And Dale, you know, he's saying, I'm just a husband. I'm a husband just doing what I promised to do until death do us part. And we see that, right? Where Dale's just taking care of his wife. He's doing what a husband is supposed to do, you know? Or we think of somebody like Ophelia, who's caring for her grandchildren and her elderly uncle. So she's really kind of sandwiched in between two generations and trying to meet everybody's needs. And she just has that belief that caregiving is really taking care of families just part of her culture. So it's not really anything that she, you know, she doesn't really see herself in a particular role. It's just what she's doing. And then we see somebody like Lacey, she's, you know, a young mom, you know, caring for her son with behavioral and functional disabilities. And she's just telling us, I'm not his caregiver, I'm his mom. So the first thing we really want to do is talk to caregivers about their role as a caregiver, even when they don't see themselves in that caregiving role. We know, and I just think, again, Dr. Tromp just really laid it out so eloquently this morning, caregiving affects every family. We know that a caregiver's well-being is directly related to the well-being of their loved one. Just like what came out of the Rosalind Carter Institute. In other words, we know that caregiver well-being is more patient well-being. And I kind of hate using that word patient, but we just know that when caregivers are doing better, the people that they care for are doing better as well. and you can just really set everybody for success. I'm going to push this to Emma. She's going to talk more about the phases of caregiving.
So one of the big things that we talk to caregivers about a lot is where they're at in their journey as a caregiver, because based on research from the T-Care platform and a lot of research being done around caregiving, we know that there are generally about 5 phases of caregiving, right? And folks can fall anywhere in here, and it can be kind of a spectrum where you can move back and forth, especially like with Dr. Trump illustrated that, sometimes you have all these really great systems of support, but maybe your loved one has a progressive disease, and so things get harder every once in a while, and so you can kind of bounce back and forth on the spectrum. But the first part of the phases of caregiving may be somebody who really doesn't feel like they're doing a lot of caregiving, right? Because maybe they're only calling and checking in on a care receiver from far away, or maybe you've just taken on financial tasks in the marriage because maybe your spouse is no longer able to do them with as much concentration or memory as they used to, or maybe it's that you're taking your parent grocery shopping these days, or helping them pick up their prescriptions. But that is really usually the first part of beginning to be a caregiver. And it's usually about 5% of your role with that person, right? And then you have this whole other 95% of your role that you relate to them as a friend, a parent, a child, whatever that relationship was existing. The second part is when the realization that the tasks are starting to creep out of the scope of that relationship, right? So this is generally when people start to view themselves as caregiver, because instead of just helping them go shopping or calling to check in on them, we're now maybe driving them to appointments, or we're starting to help them schedule different appointments. And we're really taking on about 25% of that role. We're starting to think about them outside of that context. Like, did they take their medication today, right? So it's starting to take up more of your brain time and more of your role with them. And that's where we see that really start to be identified. And then in caregiver phase 3, this is when somebody is generally very much identifying as a caregiver, right? And their activities are substantially beyond the boundaries of what the relationship was previously, right? So this is at the point where you may be helping somebody brush their hair before they're going to bed, making sure that they're brushing their teeth, taking showers. And oftentimes people at this point are talking about the various areas of friction. I hear a lot of folks say, I just want them to get in the shower. It's been a battle to get them to do their laundry. I'm trying to make sure that they're eating, but they never have an appetite and they can't understand why they need to have good nutrition, right? These are a lot of the things that we hear in that caregiving phase 3 of that role, right? And so at this point, the relationship is about 50-50. You may still identify as their friend, their daughter, their spouse, but you're really at that point where you're also really taking on caring for that person. Phase 4 is when it gets just even a little bit more intense, right? So this is when those caregiving activities dominate that role of the relationship, right? So you heard Dr. Trump say this morning that her mom was her best friend, and she used to be the person that she would come home and talk to about work. And now she can't do that so much because mom's needs have exceeded her ability to hear her talk about her day, right? And so that's kind of this phase 4 portion. And this is when folks start to think about the long-term facilities, or maybe the long-term placements, or maybe they're thinking about bringing more care into the home for more of a 24/7 approach, right? And they're really not thinking about themselves relationally as that person's person, right? Whether that's the spouse, the brother, the sister, the parent situation. And it's 75% of the role. And then in caregiver phase 5, that's actually where we see things kind of interestingly, it's very similar to phase 2, but things have maybe started to pop back a little bit. So usually in phase 5, this is where we start to see our caregivers maybe learn to put some boundaries down, or learn to accept help differently and start to parse out little bits of those roles, right? They're bringing in formal care providers, and they're learning how to be comfortable with the idea that somebody else is helping their loved one or their care recipient. And they're still really doing some caregiving, but it's dropped to about 25% of the role because they've been able to spread that out amongst other folks. And so we help folks identify where they are on this different phases of caregiving, to help them recognize what it is that they're doing as caregivers and how these tasks are beyond what their normal scope in that relationship is, and maybe creating additional sort of burdens to that. So we're going to talk about how these phases relate to what we're going to do with them as navigators. So Sheila, if you want to get the next slide for me.
Definitely. And so just the next slide, we just want to hear in the chat, what phase of caregiving are you in right now? So are you in that, one phase where you're just kind of starting to see yourself in this, and maybe just like 5% of your role? clear up to that 75% range where you're at that 4 where caregiving is about 75% of your role and caregiving activities really dominate that role relationship? Or
so
do you
we're
see
at a
yourself back
4.
in that number 5, where you've kind of been through this and now you're kind of finding yourself recovering that portion of your relationship role? Where are folks at?
Yeah, go ahead and tell us in the chat where you'd rate yourself. I see that we've got 1 4 in there.
A 4, 2,
2, okay. 3. So we've got some folks that are firmly fixed that they're in that caregiver role. Oh, even a 1, somebody who's just starting to realize what's happening there. Yep, 4, since, okay. Got somebody who's
you've
got a
been doing
daughter
this
who's
a long time,
dependent.
Debbie. Yeah.
Yep.
Alrighty, so we're getting some good feedback there. So it seems like at the very least, and I kind of thought that because you're at a caregiver conference, that you at least identifying that caregiver role, and that's crucial to us really being able to get that help that we need and get what we need to be successful.
Absolutely.
And
We got another 4 in there. All right, so 4 seems to be a consensus here. So when folks get on the phone with me as a navigator and we go through this evidence-based assessment that we're doing, what this assessment is looking at is not only where you are in those 5 phases that we just talked about, but what your scores are in these 4 different areas of stress burden, right? And these are important because they help contextualize where supports or resources might be helpful, okay? So the first of those stress areas is a relationship burden. And this is that spot where maybe your care receiver, whoever that person might be in your life, you're starting to have maybe more arguments with them, or there's this role change where you're having to take on maybe more of a parental role with them when that's not the role, or they want to fight you for some independence a little bit, which makes complete sense, right? And so it's that friction spot where the relationship is changing and you're feeling disagreements and you're feeling the relationship change and having to really figure out how to navigate that role, right? So we're going to look at your relationship burden scores. The second is the objective burden. My favorite metaphor for this is like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? So when you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and you put on the peanut butter, and sometimes if you're me, you get overzealous and you put on way too much jelly, and then you close that sandwich and the jelly just oozes out. Maybe it hits the work surface that you're making your peanut butter and jelly sandwich on. It drips all over your shirt. It gets on the plate, right? This is the idea of objective burden, right? That caregiving starts to touch and affect those different parts of our lives. So maybe it's that you've had to cut back hours at work, or you're not focused at work because you're thinking about what you need to do for your care recipient, or it's that you're having to make 5 million different calls when you're on whatever break you're on, or in your day when you should be doing things like laundry or cleaning. Or maybe it's that you're starting to have other relationships in your life experience stress or lack of attention because you're having to concentrate on this person's needs so much, right? So that's the idea of objective burden, that it squeezes out and touches all of these different areas of our life, right? The third thing that we're going to relate to you on is the stress burden, okay? And this one, no fancy definition, it's just quite literally, how stressed are you? And what does that look like, right? Because I think we can all put our hands in the air and say, I'm stressed, right? So that's what that one looks like. But the fourth is what I think is a really important key factor of our program. And this is the idea of identity discrepancy. I like to describe identity discrepancy looking at like one of the roles, right? So say if we go back to Dale, who is caring for his wife with MS, right? Dale probably very much before the MS diagnosis and before things progressed, identified as her husband. And that was a very different role than what he's having to take on now. And now he might be having to take on almost this paternalistic role where he's having to order her to take medications, to eat, to go to the doctor's office, and maybe even kind of a secretary role of managing her schedule, getting to these appointments, getting to these therapies, securing procedures or whatever that is. And so a lot of folks identify that they have to sort of switch roles frequently throughout the day as they're caring for this person. And the role that they have to switch into isn't always one that they want to switch into. So there's this feeling of friction of like, I'm doing this, but this is not the person that I want to be. And this is not something that I feel comfortable with. And that's that idea of an identity discrepancy, right? That until we accept our role as caregivers and accept the things that we have to do as caregivers, we continue to have this friction because we're really occupying 2 different personality sets, and quite frequently throughout the day. And the research that the folks over at TCare have done have shown that the more folks that can, move past this identity discrepancy and really accept their role as caregivers and just sort of accept where life is going as being a caregiver, then the rest of their stress also starts to relieve, right? Because they're not fighting so hard against themselves. And so I find the idea of identity discrepancy really key with caregivers. So when we are building care plans with folks, we're going to look at these different 4 areas and see what supports or what personal goals we can help them write to address these 4 different areas based on their scores. So Sheila, next slide, if you will. So this is where the care plan comes in. So after somebody's done that assessment with me and we've gotten a scorecard, like you'll see down below on this slide, this is sort of a scorecard that comes out of it, or assessment summary. And it's going to tell us based on this assessment how things are going to kind of going. And I usually take the time to go through this with caregivers and make sure that all of it makes sense to them and they feel like it relates to them. But we're going to look at, okay, are we really high in relationship burden, but maybe we're not ready to address that. And we really want to look at the identity discrepancy and talk about caregiver education or finding support groups for that. Or is it that right now we're spending just too much time doing some things? Are there other people that we can bring into the fold to help with that? And so we're going to be using this scorecard and kind of explaining to folks what phase they're in, you know, what their scores mean, and how are some of the ways that that has related to the stories that they've told me as we've gone through these assessments. Okay, next slide. From there, we're going to build the care plan, right? So for somebody like Dale, whose wife has MS, one of the first things I'm going to do is talk about caregiver education, if that's something that he said that he wanted, right? And trying to find him supports and connections for other families that are dealing with MS diagnoses, right? And it may also be looking at different supports like respite care or budgets or legal planning, all of those kinds of things. And with somebody like Ophelia, I might connect her to a group like Relatives as Parents, which is a local group that supports folks who have taken on that parenting role for their children, right? So they're caring for their grandchildren, or maybe they're caring for their nieces and nephews or what have you, because of some sort of breakdown in the other child's caregiver's life, right? And we're seeing that a lot with like the opiate epidemic, specifically in Idaho. Okay. And we might help Ophelia find different support groups. We might help her also learn to understand someone with Medicaid experience, right? So maybe the child that she's helping to care for needs connections with a Medicaid budget. And so we might help her understand that, where the parent was previously taking on all of that role and now she has to learn all of that information, IEPs, all of those kinds of things, right? And for somebody like Lacey might get connected to something like IPOL, Idaho Parents Unlimited, where we're going to connect her to somebody who can help her find education and advocacy for her son's conditions, but also help her find community with other parents that are going through that. And maybe even someone to help advocate with her for the schools, for what his specific needs might be, so that she feels like she has somebody on her side that is helping her handle all of these tasks that she probably feels pretty alone in doing most of the time. So those are the ways that we're going to be building these really personalized care plans based on the stories and the scores that we get out of these assessments with our caregivers to help build a supportive network with them. And sometimes it's even personal goals, like helping them have somebody hold them accountable for going to the gym or going on a walk, or even going to their doctor, right? How often do we sacrifice our own health and our own health as caregivers and think, I can't go to the doctor and find out that I'm sick, you know, but maybe we need to check in with them, and maybe they have supports or services that could help us out as well. So Sheila, next slide for me. I'm going to turn it back over to Sheila here.
Yeah, and these are just some of the supports that we see caregivers ask about. They ask about, training. Like, I found out that my mom has Alzheimer's. I don't know what's going on. Or my dad, he asked the same questions 20 times a day, and I don't understand why. Or like Emma was talking about, a training with, a young child where this child needs an IEP, and it's like, what are all these acronyms? And we just find ourselves in this new world. So really just training around the needs of the person that we're caring for. Transportation needs, I think that's something that we hear about, pretty frequently here, because there is that transportation need. Oh, and I wanted to link back to Nancy really quick. She was talking about, she really identifies with that identity discrepancy, although some of the skills, identities that caregivers not good at, so it's different for everybody. That's why we assess that, just because there is that identity discrepancy piece. So thank you for bringing that, to the forefront. Again, back to that transportation piece, I think we struggle with that here in Idaho. where we're trying to utilize Medicaid transport, or we're trying to utilize supports, or just what's going on. So again, that transportation can be a really big piece because it can get very expensive and time consuming quickly when you're the main transport. Just somebody to talk to. We hear from caregivers, and often folks feel really isolated, or just nobody gets what they're going through. So if we can connect somebody just so they have somebody to talk to, it can be a really powerful experience for folks. Just like that financial support, what's out there? I suddenly have my grandchild with me and I'm on a fixed income, what can I do? Or the person that I'm caring for has all of these, equipment needs and might need a wheelchair or some kind of special visual aid and can't quite figure out how to access it. So we can really look at some of those financial needs. Navigating systems. I think anybody who's caregiving for any amount of time can often find themselves, at the doorstep of the Department of Health and Welfare and the school, and trying to look at this, and suddenly maybe find themselves dipped into a legal system because of a situation that happened, or who knows, right? So we just find ourselves in the middle of all these different systems, and that can be stressful because we know here that our systems don't always talk and collaborate. And so we have to help kind of build those linkages sometimes for folks. Legal. There may need to be some kind of, financial situation or a trust or something that would need to be set due to what's going on right now. Or we might worry about, our young children. Well, what if something happens to me? Then what? And so just we can connect folks to people who can really connect to those legal to help meet their legal needs. Those support groups or counseling, and that is huge. And I would be willing to guess that as part of the reason that everybody has found themselves here today is that we want to have that support. We want to kind of find our people. It's crucial no matter what we're doing. And I think it's even more crucial when it comes to a person in a caregiver role to really just, there's somebody that gets me somewhere, or am I just here in my house by myself doing this? Hopefully, that flexible employer, like what can we do to have conversations around that? So our employer might understand when we might have to leave, at 3 o'clock, 3 days a week, or we may have to try to work on a more hybrid schedule or whatever's going on. And then just that respite. I think that's another one we hear about in Idaho often. I think that it's not a secret right now that we're struggling with our workforce in general around respite. And so anything we can do to help support those respite needs, or really look at those natural supports, like who's in your circle? Who are your people? Is it just you? Like, what can we do here? So we really see those needs kind of popping to the top for folks. But I'd really love to have more of a conversation about this. And I see our little group keeps growing, so I'm thrilled. But just start throwing things in the chat, guys. What supports do you feel are missing in Idaho? So let's just start there. What supports do you feel are missing in Idaho? Kind of start popping things in the chat.
Yeah, I don't think there's somebody already who put in the chat a story that I don't think is uncommon, right? Maybe they were laid off after so many years, and they feel like it might have been because their boss thought they couldn't put 150% into their job because they had all these other things going on, and maybe lack of understanding and empathy in an employer. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's tough when you're in healthcare, right? Because you think, oh, healthcare, they'll understand that I might need to care for somebody else. And so it's a little devastating when they don't, right? When those people that we think are going to show up for us don't.
Mary Kim put in a big one in the chat for people in Idaho, which is help for so many folks like us who are living in rural or remote areas. Yeah, if respite is hard in Ada County, in a city, getting it in those more rural areas has got to be almost impossible.
Yeah, we got a call to our line just this week about somebody who'd called dozens of respite providers they'd gotten. I still want to know where that list came from, Emma. Somebody got a list from somebody, and suddenly they found themselves in a position of calling dozens of respite providers and just said, where am I starting here? What am I doing here? What else is kind of popping to the front for folks? Okay, let's move on to the next one then. When you first realized you were a caregiver, what resource connections do you, yeah, great example, Mary. Surprised that geriatric doctors didn't seem to have good resource materials, right? When we go to those people that we see as like being an expert or an authority figure, and they're not. Because again, time of caregivers is so limited. And then when we go somewhere and it doesn't work out, it's challenging, right? Let's see here. just reaching out to different things. Again, thank you guys for this chat. I know I'm a little bummed in this platform. People can't like talk out, which I think is tough for me because I want to grab onto people's chats. So I apologize for being a little awkward in the chat. Just some struggles around answering because we're not familiar with resources out there. This person's asked so many organizations like caregiver companies, Alzheimer's foundations, and just not really getting anything specific, right? So again, I think that just really, Jennifer, illustrates about just this lack of information, right? Like generally we're not signing up to be a caregiver, right? We're just trying to be there for somebody. And then we find ourselves in this world of, there's a lot of acronyms being thrown at me. This person's got to be a lot of places. I'm trying to take care of my own life. What does this all mean, right? So just, again, trying to kind of run down those resources. And that's what I think Family Caregiver Navigator has a particularly talent in, is we're not just going to give you a list and say, okay, go call those people. We'll talk to you in a few months or never. We really do have this warm handoff process to where we know the people that we're referring to. We can call, Yvonne, or we can call Yvette, excuse me, at the Alzheimer's Society. We can call at the Alzheimer's Association, or we can call the attorney that we know. So we can have those, so we really know who we're handing people off to. We're not just going to give you a list of numbers and go forward. So I really like that warm handoff approach that Family Caregiver Navigator really embodies.
Yeah, usually if we can't give you a warm handoff, we've probably talked to them and just said, how do we make it easier for folks to navigate your system? So we can give you some of those secret words. I can't believe how often you need to know the right turn phrases to get what you need. So.
Definitely. Yeah, another great comment. It's hard even having healthcare here or getting supplies. My brother's homebound and won't leave the home. So with healthcare, people aren't in the picture much any longer. So yeah, just getting stuff like, do we need oxygen? Do we need some kind of personal care item? Do we need, whatever, like, how do we get that stuff, right? And so there's resources out there, but again, they're just so hard to access when we're so overwhelmed. Like when we're that person, when we first started talking about this, when we're that person and we're at a 5, we're in that red zone where we're just so distressed. We don't have time to go run down, when a wheelchair tire goes flat. Like we don't know what to do because it's too much, right?
Yeah, Nancy, Nancy put in the chat, that she's got a daughter that started New Behaviors and Liberty Healthcare, which is the evaluator for a lot of like these DD budgets and whatnot. Will evaluate the behavior, but doesn't really give them resources as to where to go. So, Family Caregiver Navigator is somewhere that you could call and tell us kind of what you're experiencing, and we might be able to connect you or point you into the right direction of folks who might be able to help with those resources.
Yeah, and that Liberty assessment's a big, long assessment, right? So you want it to work. It takes a lot of time.
Yep.
You have to wait to get to it sometimes. I've heard of people having to kind of like wait sometimes for those. So Jennifer, I love your question, and I'm going to come back to that. I want to honor this other comment really quick. This person is L, right? L. I just believe Idaho needs residential communities where senior caregivers 50 plus can live along their disabled children and parents. This is being done in some cities across the U.S. What a great model. Yeah, if I could put that on the wish list of things that I wanted in Idaho, that would be up there, because if we had a way just to I think it was Sarah that had mentioned at the beginning of our opening today about how she lives next door to her parent, right? And that can be hard. She got very lucky, right? That can be very hard to navigate sometimes. We can't all just move in next door and have that, it looks different for everybody, right? So that model existing for one person we know at least, but it would be wonderful to expand that.
Well, some people put some resources in the chat. I love it.
Yeah, no, how can we market your program better? So there's a few things we can do. Tell your friends, tell people, show up to conferences like this, right? And we'll talk to you about it. Emma, anybody, I am happy anytime. If there's an organization, if there's a group, if there's anybody you would like me to come talk to, I'll throw my email in the chat. Please reach out, send me an email. I've got a PowerPoint and I'll travel. So I'm happy to connect with people however I can, because I had that exact same experience, Jennifer. So I'm so glad you said that. I've been a social worker in the community for just under a decade. And I like to think that I'm kind of an expert of resources, and I came to Family and I just saw this kind of pop across me, and I'm like, man, why don't I know about this? And if I don't know about it, who else doesn't know about it? And that's one of the things that really inspired me to find myself in this new role, because I just went, man, if there's something out there that's going to help people, that's free, that's low barrier, and it's easy to access, how do we do this, right? And so you're welcome. I'll put my email in the chat. In fact, I'll do that right now.
Yeah, I threw in our organization's email and phone number in there as
Yeah.
well, for anyone who feels like we need it. But yeah, I saw some folks putting out some resources in the chat. There was a Facebook group for folks that are interested in talking about that residential living situation that was mentioned. So
Yeah, MK, thank you for the shout out to Emma from Personal Experience. Family Caregiver Navigator is amazing. I have Emma as my person to connect with me every 3 months. She is wonderful and so very helpful. And we should find MK. We're always looking for testimonials. That's another way we can support family.
She gave us a testimonial.
Oh, good.
We
Okay,
have that on
another
file.
person. That's another way we support Family Caregiver Navigator is.
Yeah, Ben's currently working on.
When good
Ben's
things
working on
happen,
that,
let's get
so.
them out there, right?
Yep.
Also too, let's see here. We are discussing these models on Facebook in the Where We Will Go group. Welcome to join. And I would love, I don't know if you can let me know how to contact you, Elle, or if there's a way I'm happy to be a part of that conversation, or if you can invite me or whatever, I'm happy to do what I can to be part of that conversation, because I'd love to. Is that in the Idaho care? Is that in that caregiver group on Facebook, or where is that happening at? But yeah, I'm not sure where to access that at, but if I can access it, I'm happy to do that. And again, it's just Family Caregiver Navigator really just is that, nice connection for folks, and it's easy to access.
Mm-hmm.
When you really first saw yourself in that caregiver role, I mean, like, so let's just say you could look back at yourself, a year ago, or like one person said 34 years ago, and what would you tell yourself then? Like, what do you wish you'd known then that you know now? Oh, thank you. I think Where We Will Go is headquartered out of Texas, but it's expanding statewide. Okay, awesome. I'm going to
write that down for me.
Yeah, I'm going to put that in my notes right now, because I said I am newer in this role, so I am still learning some of those resources that I didn't always know about before. And so, yeah. So you guys, yeah, no, I want to get the word out more too. That's one of my, excuse me. I was doing some Googling this morning and my little screen just popped up. Yeah. So Where We Will Go, I'll just write that down then, because I want to find out more about that. Just talking about residential models across the United States.
Yeah, I think it's going to be key to come.
Right? Like, that's such a great question. Like, where will we go? Like, what are the next steps? Like, what does this look like? And so I just think what a great name for a group. So I can't wait to check out that model a little more.
And I think those grassroots community efforts are really important in a state like Idaho, where our legislature doesn't tend to think about those things very often.
Right. So. Yeah. And so is there anything kind of popping up for folks that just things they wish they would have known about? I guess Family Caregiver Navigator, right, Jennifer? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. No, yeah, because like I've said, we just have this really, I'm in this new role, like I said, and I feel like I won the lottery a little bit because
Bob, we're well connected to Legacy Corps. They're actually one of our really strong referrals because they've got a few programs out of Legacy Corps. Like they have the volunteer program for the VA folks, and they also have the Powerful Tools for Caregiving course that Karen Kuba tends to proctor. And so we've got a good relationship with the Legacy Corps folks. Yep, we refer to them, and sometimes they refer to us.
Awesome.
At least in the Boise area through Janice.
Okay, Bob, I'm joining this group right now. So on Facebook. Do you have a resource guide on how to have that conversation with other relatives to get them on board with respite care when they are in denial that care even needs to be given? Emma, what have you seen around that?
So I would direct folks to our Idaho Caregiver Alliance webpage. There is a Learn on Your Own library on that website that has a ton of resources about those kinds of things, those kinds of conversations. Also, the Idaho Commission on Aging has a whole Learn on Your Own library just for caregivers that also covers those kinds of things. But one of the things that I think is actually a really good resource for folks is talking to elder life planning attorneys and whatnot. And I think folks are scared of hearing the word attorney and lawyers because typically that totals to dollar signs, but they are usually really familiar with those conversations and able to help you navigate those conversations in terms of coming from a different place, as opposed to I can't care for you anymore and I need help, and I need help to bring it in. Sometimes it's conversations around, we just need to plan for what's going to happen in the future. What if I get hurt and I can't help you in and out of the bathtub, or I can't make food for you anymore? We maybe need to start to plan for those kinds of things, right? I tell folks that have someone who is experiencing Alzheimer's and dementia and they're interested in bringing in a respite caregiver, don't poise it as a respite caregiver. Rather, poise it as somebody that you're bringing in that wants to talk to them about some aspect of their past, right? Like, oh, I was contacted by this person who really wants to talk to you about your past military experience, if they've got VA benefits going on, and maybe they had a previous service history. And they just want to interview you about your service history. And then you can tell the respite provider that too, and help it to feel more like this conversation that they're going to have with somebody, as opposed to respite, right? And so sometimes I think there's those little key things that we can do there as well.
Definitely. Great example again, Emma. Thank you. Training mostly on what to expect, right? Like, oh, hold on. Yeah. Wish this organization had existed 3 decades ago. Take full advantage of one. And please do. We have that team. We love to keep folks busy. So please call them, help them be busy. Let's see here. Training mostly on what to expect. I feel like I woke up in a dark room in the middle of a house and trying to find the front door, building the airplane in the air. And I think that is an example that I can really resonate with. Only I refer to it as you're kind of changing the oil in the car as it's moving. Everything's happening and you can't just stop it, right? You have to keep going, and so that training can just be so crucial. And I know the Alzheimer's Association does a lot of good stuff around that. Idaho Relatives as Parents does some great stuff. I know I saw Charlie Hahn is here today. Don't hesitate to poke her. She's an old friend of mine from my foster care days. And she does a lot of work around relatives as parents. And she's happy to do some of that training stuff as well. And really just talk to you about, man, I'm 65 years old. I was looking at an RV and now I've got my 3 young grandkids with me. What am I doing here? And they have there's a lot of acronyms connected to their life and I don't know what they are, So if we can have those conversations, right? And that training, it's better. And it's good to know, Jennifer, that you've got the father, you and your father have one of the best elder care lawyers ever. I'm thrilled to know that, because that's such a need, because we just don't always think about like somebody that might be aging, what like their legal needs might be. And so that's tremendous. I'm so glad you have that.
Oh, and people always identify that as a top strain when it comes up, when they're talking to me and they're like, oh, we just fumbled across an unknown sort of legal barrier or an unknown legal speed bump, if you will. That is usually something so incredibly stressful for folks. So having a knowledgeable guide for that is very crucial.
And we just see Becky, who has such a wealth, it sounds like, of caregiving history, and 37 years in with her son, but parents are now 82 and 83 and we're gearing up to care for them. And we talk about, people in your position really being in that sandwich generation where you've got, you've got your son being the bread on one side, and you've got your parents being the bread on another side, and there's you, the peanut butter in the middle, and how do we do this, and like Emma talked about earlier, just talked about that squish that happens sometimes, and how you get a little oozy when we're getting pushed from two ends, right? And just wishing that we had help navigating getting our son SSI when he was born. And I've worked with families like that in other social work arenas where it's like, we could have been getting money this entire time. We could have been getting insurance this entire time and we didn't know. And that's devastating for people when you're just like mortgaging the house to try to pay for things when you had a support you didn't know about, and that's really what we here at Family Caregiver Navigator do, is just to help connect people to those supports. And I'm not here to sell you a program and say, we have all the answers to everything and you're going to leave 100% all the time. But man, if we can give you one resource that you didn't have before, it's well worth your time.
Gosh, or even to know that I'm going to take the time to go research something. If you ask me for a support that I don't know if it exists or I don't know the answer to it, I'm going to say, hold up, I'm going to write that down. I will do some research for you and come back to you and let you know if I found anything or if there's somebody who can speak to it better as an expert. So we're also going to take that little bit of research off your plate, right?
Yeah. No, and we talk all the time. Our little team does. Like, we had a situation pop up just a couple weeks ago, and we can kind of pop it out to folks and say, hey, what do you know about this? Have you known about this? And I don't think anybody on our team, is an expert in everything, but everybody's an expert in something. And so we can kind of help build those connections for folks sometimes.
Mhm.
And again, just talking about getting SSI when son was born, that was in another state, but it might be something people in Idaho need when giving birth to a child with a known disability. That children may have access to services, being born just by nature of what's going on.
Mhm.
And I'm hearing a little bit of this already, but I just want to make sure I'm capturing everything. What limitations did you kind of bump up against when you were trying to get support? So like what kind of rose to the surface for people? Like what's happening now? Like where are your bumps in the road now? And I think some stuff that I've heard already is just trying to navigate so many different systems. Like, well, health and welfare said this, but Social Security said that. But I talked to this other person and they're telling me this, and just this, it's too much. We kind of get stuck in the spot of either having so much information that we don't know what to do with, or we have so little information that we don't know where to start. And so if we can kind of help find that sweet spot.
Not even knowing what questions to ask.
Yeah, it can just
right.
be,
There's a big language lexicon barrier a lot of times.
absolutely. We don't know what we don't know. And again, Jennifer, thank you for saying that. There can actually be a lot out there for people, but man, if we don't know about it, it's hard to say. And if nothing else, sometimes your voice matters so much to us because your voices help us tell the story of caregivers. Because we do, we are a program of the Idaho Caregiver Alliance, and so they're able to do that more advocacy role and kind of do those things. And so again, it's just really important to, even if we can't, manage everything about your personal situation, your voice continues to float up the chain. And I think that can mean a lot too, just knowing that even if it's not working, even if it's not helping me, our voices going together, it's powerful, right?
Oh, Becky, you're singing the song of my people with having a son who was disabled at birth. Kind of knowing, I thankfully had a really great hospital worker that came to me and told me about all these different programs, but I recognize that is not always the case. And that doesn't mean that we haven't had to continue to ask interesting questions about whether or not things even existed after the fact. So I can identify with that.
Yeah. And just our inability to get what we need from a system, right? Like, so we're saying my son, he needs to be 24/7, right? But Liberty's saying 50 hours a week. And so there's a big difference in between 168 hours a week and 50. And who's filling that gap? Caregivers.
And for the person who wrote that, there is a person I know she's in this conference, and I know she's comfortable with me giving out her name. Her name is Mary Kim Spears, and she's told me to go ahead and connect her. She started a small little organization to help track the kind of hours that you're spending caring for somebody more closely to help with justification needs. So if you can find her in this conference, I would really suggest, or you can reach out to me. She's given me clearance to help folks find her. So if you want to reach out to me after this conference, I can help you find her. She's got this really cool app in development to help folks track that. And I know that it's been really helpful for some folks.
Yeah. And those are the kind of connections we're talking about. So here we are. We're taking the time today to care for ourselves a little bit and show up for a caregiver conference. And we happen to show up at the Family Caregiver Navigator session because we want to find out more. And we got a little something, right? It's just that warm handoff that means so much, especially in our community, right? Like it really is who you know sometimes.
Yeah.
And gosh, what a great example, just that location thing, right? To get where you live in the winter, you need a 4-wheel drive vehicle with studded snow tires. And most agencies don't have those vehicles. Even Norco can't come up. And I dealt with that when we were at the Department of Health and Welfare working in child protection, us in a state agency, we didn't have what we needed to get up places. And so we were like, one time we were in a little community and we had to have local law enforcement take us up on a snowmobile because there was nothing else, and so those things are real, in our town. There's just like, how do we get to where we need to go? Or how do our providers get to where they need to go so we can actually get what we need? Yeah, I wish we had a helicopter we could just drop into you guys, but we don't have quite the funding for that yet. But finding those caregivers that are just really experienced with interfacing with an elderly person plus one with dementia. So yeah, there's kind of 3 different challenges there. First, it's finding a caregiver, right? And then it's a caregiver that's experienced with interfacing with an elderly person. And then 3, dementia. So you're trying to find, it kind of feels like you're looking for a unicorn sometimes. Like,
yeah, you kind of heard Dr. Trump speak to that this morning too, where she had engaged with an agency and the agency was sending over many different folks, and that did not work for her mom, that their logic that they gave behind it was great, but that it didn't work for her mom. And I think I hear that story a lot, that
Oh
folks would
gosh,
rather
yeah.
have this one consistent person that knows their care receiver really well, that they can trust, and that their care receiver can trust, especially when there's a memory diagnosis, right?
Yeah, definitely. And then another great feedback is healthcare. Hospital providers don't get it, right? Like, you just kind of feel like you're a number there sometimes, right? Or I can't imagine the care my mom would get if I was not there to advocate for her. And again, like I said at the beginning of this presentation, if I was smart, I would find a caregiver every single day and call and thank them because you're exactly right. Your mom probably wouldn't get that support if you weren't there to advocate for her. So just, if nothing else, thank you for being there to be an advocate for your mom. It pays off. It pays off. Like we're having Mother Trump this morning. And just what you mentioned before about the system throwing out technology and acronyms like candy up a parade float, dizzying when you aren't familiar. That was so frustrating and confusing over the years. No, I wish they'd start posting in the lobby or on their website, like here's our 20 most common here's our 20 most common abbreviations, or something, because it's so hard. But luckily we know a lot of the abbreviations, right? Here at Family Caregiver Navigator, which can be helpful. So yeah, and being an advocate for parents is just one of the most important roles, and somebody should publish a glossary. That'd be a fun little project to start, a little Family Caregiver Navigator acronym guide. Because I know it is really hard. Just, man, it's like, what's an IEP? What's a QRTP? What's this? What's that? It's
504,
just, so yeah, it's so hard. So yeah, thank you for sharing all that, guys. I was gonna throw it up and type it up on the screen, but just that with the format, this chat seems to work a little better. So, and Emma touched on this a little bit, but again, we just kind of want to bring our back to where we started at with these 3 different caregiver situations. When we talk about Lacey, in that child with a severe emotional disturbance, we're connecting that parent to the YES program. The Idaho Federation for Families and Idaho Parents Unlimited. And we have good contact with those places so that we can make, strong connections. When we're looking at a husband where his wife has MS, sometimes it's just that education on the disease. Like, why is so-and-so doing this? Why is this happening?
Or what's it going to look like in 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, what's the long view? Exactly. Powerful tools for caregivers. Karen Kuba is here today. I don't think she's in this session, but I did see her bebopping around. Karen Kuba, she is the person that manages Powerful Tools for Caregivers. Because I've been new in this role, I haven't taken it yet, but I'm very excited because I hear it's a great educational program for folks who have caregivers. And sometimes that relationship piece too, right? Like, how do we work on this?
I have, and I can't guarantee it, or I can't recommend it enough. Even if it's stuff that you already know, just being with other people who get it for a minute and who all maybe need a reinforcer of what do boundaries look like, how do we put them down, what are those conversations that we have, how do I care for myself? Big advocate of learning all those tools.
And MK, thank you again. Powerful Tools for Caregivers is amazing. So there's your testimonial right there. And just that relational piece too. And I think that relationship counseling piece, that's such a nice piece to mention, just because I think that people are hesitant to call us sometimes because they just think, I know the resources, there's nothing there, this is my situation. But sometimes we can kind of help folks like think out of the box, and like, how can we access things that aren't just like services, but really just other things that we can connect to that are already within our sphere, so might not be thinking about. Then you have our grandmother, who's in that sandwich generation, caring for 2 different generations of people. Idaho relatives as parents. Charlie Hahn is here today. Please don't be afraid to poke Charlie Hahn. Tell her I said hello if I get to see her today. That area agency on aging, we have really strong partnerships with all of our area agencies on aging, here locally and many across the state. And so a lot going on there. And then just that Center on Disabilities and Human Development. That is a great program out of North Idaho that I believe stretches statewide. And so we're able to connect people to that Center on Disabilities, just to kind of, help her get to what she needs, And something that I'm particularly proud of, and I think you've already heard a little bit about today, is that we speak Spanish. And we have 2 Spanish-speaking navigators, and we are able to, in all of our printed materials and everything are provided in Spanish. And it's not just a direct like Google. We didn't just, take the brochure, put it in Google, translate it, and spit it back. We actually have like that more cultural translation piece, which can be a big deal.
Mhm.
In fact, I believe that I think in Spanish it's caring for those who care for others rather than we care for caregivers. It's just a little different inflection on the language, but it means a lot.
Yep. And if you know somebody who's a Spanish speaking caregiver and they would like to connect with ours, that Navigantes, Idaho.org is going to be completely in Spanish for them. So no need to like find the English website and then try to find the Spanish. If you direct them directly to Navigantes, everything will be translated culturally appropriately as well.
Yeah. And these are just some resources we're seeing for folks that have, different cultural needs, just that Community Council of Idaho, the Mexican consulate located in Idaho. So we have a Mexican consulate here. We've utilized them here in Family Caregiver Navigator, and then I used to utilize them in my foster care role. They actually do a lot of work, and I don't always think that, particularly if we're not interfacing with Spanish-speaking populations, we might not know what they do. The State Independent Living Council, just those are disability advocates. And I met with somebody from Link a few weeks ago and kind of asked them more about what they did. And she goes, if you can't think of anyone else that's doing it, we're probably doing it. So I really appreciated their description. And then just that guidance for agencies to help ensure from LEP. So just that, again, to ensure more of a federal site. Jennifer, good question. Yeah, please, again, we'll throw our email in the chat. I'm happy to send it out to you. It's certainly not, I have seen 2 typos on the slide, so you'll get the non-typo version when I send it to you. But yeah, I will send it to you for sure. And I think all these sessions are also recorded, so I think there's a couple ways to kind of get your hands back on it. And just some testimonials. I don't know if one of these is from anybody in our group, but just some things that are coming out of this. This program completely changed my caregiving style. It offered so many useful resources that I took advantage of. It also helped me taking care of myself, so beneficial. This one on the right here, it made it clear that I have to take care of myself or everyone goes down. I've been making all of my doctor's appointments to be sure that I'm healthy, and I joined Noom, which is a lifestyle diet changing program. Yeah, and Destiny was, I thought I have Destiny on the brain now. Emma was working with somebody and they lost 20 pounds because they started kind of connecting back to their health again. So I can't give you that as a benefit of the program. If you call us at FCN, you lose 20 pounds. I can't give you that, but it has happened. So good to know about. And then, I've asked for family help, taken this amazingly helpful class, arranged for paid caregiver assistance, volunteer assistance, and requested respite care from the state. I was unable, unwilling, unsure, and frightened to do all of it prior to this help. So again, that is transformative, right? When you can have that person that is like, I am alone, I have nowhere to go, I don't know what to do, to I have respite, I have volunteers, I have people that are on my side. And if nothing else you take away today, there are people here that are on your side, and we want to be here however we can to support you guys. So again, Family Caregiver Navigator really is here for you. Yep. We're easy to connect with. The easiest way is just to visit the Caregiver Navigator website and navigate to For Caregivers and take that short screener. I think we're actually going to run a little short on time for this. I mean, like not short on time, but I think we'll have a little extra time. And so if somebody wants to stay back, I'm happy to take you there. I'll show you where to do it at. Then a navigator will reach out regarding next steps in connecting with individualized resources. Again, I'm hearing that powerful tools for caregivers is just such a great support, and help is on the way. So I'm going to challenge you guys. What is one thing I can do today for myself? And what is one thing I can do to make my role as a caregiver sustainable? You can put this in the chat, or you can just commit to yourself today, guys. What am I going to do? And these are just some really nice self-care ideas, guys. And these are all things that we don't need to have a government resource for. These are not things that we need to we don't need to go find something, right? Like they're available to us. And sometimes it's just a matter of, like next week it's going to be 62 degrees. I hope you get to go out and breathe some of that 62-degree air. Maybe take your dog on a walk, pet your dog, color. Some people really find joy in just creating a little bit of art or color or whatever.
Well, I did that last night before bed.
Yeah.
That's it.
Getting off the internet. Just try to stay on the internet today, guys, for a few more hours with this conference. But after that, disconnect, right? Just drink some water. And I think drinking water cannot be stated enough. Drinking water, and I wish, I don't think it's on here, just breathing, and I was thinking about doing it, but I think we'll just let people kind of get out a little early today. Like, go to YouTube and just type in breathing bubble. And it's just a nice little like guided, like, breathe, stop, breathe, stop. Because sometimes breathing, it can just get that oxygen back in your brain, back in your body, and kind of get things going again. And just treat yourself. And, it might not be the best thing ever, but man, go down and, just even being able to like go down and just do something small for yourself, no matter what that is, even if it's just like reading a book, taking 5 minutes, anything, listening to music or favorite podcasters. I'm a big podcast person myself, so I'm always open to new podcast suggestions. So, just there's a lot out there, guys. So while we're sitting here today, and I'm seeing some good things in the chat here about making a commitment to walk a half hour daily. And like when this conference is over, gonna go out and do a daily walk, even though you're in 4 feet of snow. Good gracious. I appreciate your commitment to that. And then another person saying music, so again, music's free, right? We can get to music without having to, call health and welfare to get it, right? Same with walking. I appreciate your commitment. About what's going on. Gina, just remembering Dr. Trump's presentation, and everything is recorded. I'm going to remember that too. I learned a lot about Dr. Trump today, and I work at this organization. I've worked here twice actually at Boise State, and I had no idea about the depth of her story. So that was really powerful. And absolutely, I'd be willing to bet that if we'd asked any of you to be the keynoter, you'd have a story like that too that we haven't heard yet. You guys have really tremendous stories, and just have kind of charted your own path to get here. Not everybody. I was talking to somebody. I work in drug and alcohol counseling part-time. And I was talking to somebody just this week about how they're caring for a parent and they're just so alone. And I was just kind of telling them about this conference this weekend. And they were saying, there's a caregiver alliance. There's things caregivers can do. And they had no idea, and so you guys are here. You guys are the people that know things. And that's amazing. So you guys have already gotten steps here that other people have no idea that's here. Again, just practicing gratitude. That's amazing, right? Like you don't have to call Liberty to practice gratitude, right? Like you can do that free of charge. Some person's not going to bake their favorite treat. I appreciate that.
Mary Kim, you're over there just like fluffing my ego over there.
Yeah. And again, just that accountability piece, talking about that weight loss piece, so that's huge, so again, just those big things. And so, again, just drink water, breathe, and walk and smile, right? All again, the stuff we can do today. And so,
and one thing that I love for caregivers, Sheila, that I want to add in really quickly. One thing that I love for caregivers is we're like constantly writing to-do lists, which kind of sets the mindset like you haven't done anything and you have 1 million things to do. I would invite you to flip your script, write down what you have done, and then celebrate. Give yourself credit for it. Give yourself a I've gotten done list, because I think we need to remember what we've already gotten done.
Yeah, thank you. Because you've gotten so much in. And if you are here, you've already done a lot, because people don't always find this, right? So if you're here, it's something. And so, again, there's just so much for folks. Yeah. And so you can check something off your done list today, right? Like you showed up, right? You showed up for people that you care about. You showed up for yourself. And we are thrilled you're here today. And we sincerely hope that you connect to Family Caregiver Navigator. And if nothing else, just connect back to people that care about you today. Because again, you are doing hard work and you do not get enough thank yous. You do not get enough high fives or thumbs up or whatever works for you. And so, if nothing else today, just leave knowing there's a community of people that really deeply appreciate and are just honored by the work that you do every day. So I think I'll just leave you with that. And so if there's any questions, anything coming up, if there's anything I can do to kind of smooth things out, I'm happy to do that. So, but with that, I hope to hear from you soon.
Jennifer put in the chat, finding some support groups. I would mention that there are some disease-specific support groups. So if it's somebody with an Alzheimer's or dementia diagnosis that you're caring for and you want to talk specifically with them, the Idaho Alzheimer's Association has like 5, 10, 15 different support groups going on. Facebook has a wealth of different groups. Also, Tree City Church is running a general caregiver support group on Wednesdays, and it's not a church-related thing. They're just a counseling center housed within the church, and they're doing a free caregiver drop-in support group on Wednesdays. So a couple of those different connections.
But thank you guys, and tell people about us. So if you're in here today and you're like, I was just in this session this morning, it was awesome. People are helping. We're very accessible. Yeah, go be our cheerleaders. We'll be yours too. Alrighty, thank you guys. It's really a pleasure today. Thank you so much.